Hello everyone, this is part 38 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Gaara's disbelieving green eyes blinked several times more than necessary as he stared down upon the missive currently clenched between tight fingers, the letters scrawled onto its surface bouncing within the walls of his head, echoing almost tauntingly. In his office currently, was Baki, Zhuge Liang, and technically, Suna's newest head medic Tsunade. Gaara had met the woman when he had gone to Suna initially, before Temari had been captured and Kankuro had been injured, and could say, from his assessment anyway, that she was nothing like her former self. She was thin, too thin, in his opinion, forehead settled in a constant crease of either anger or morose sorrow, her cheeks were knot and her skin sallow, no longer the vibrant shade it had once been. She seemed perfectly content with healing others while allowing herself to wither and decay. He suspected, because of this, that the rumors that she had lost a student were true then. Or had lost a daughter. Stories were mixed in the retelling of Kumo's fall, differing whether she had lost a student or daughter, or both, so he couldn't be sure, but one needed to be true for her to appear like this. Her medical expertise had gotten her the posting of head medic, along with her reputation. However, given another 2 weeks, if she did not show signs of improvement, he would have to take matters into his own hands, perhaps even going as far as removing her from active duty. He hoped, truly, that it didn't come to that. Tsunade was a well-known medic, and showing that she could crumble under the stress of the recent events, though admittedly understandable, was horrible for the men's morale. But regardless, whatever morale they may lose by his interfering with Tsunade's duties, and doubts as to her continued effectiveness would be more than made up for if what he held in his hand was true. Glancing up to Baki, the Kazekage swallowed the saliva that had gathered in his mouth before he spoke. Are you sure you've verified this, Baki? If you've gotten my hopes up for. Yes, we did. Baki interrupted with a smile, ignoring Gaara's previously warning countenance. 13 times we ran it through our tests. All agree that the message not a forgery. Gaara's eyes returned to the script, passing over the words once more. To the god I'm Kazekage, Sabakuno Gaara. We hope that this message finds you well, Kazekage. The news that has reached us is grave indeed. While, in the past, we have elected to stand aside and allow the conflict within the main continents and villages to spread abound, and the war machine of Konoha to march forward. We find that we can do so no longer. In view of the recent annihilation of the white city of Kumo, we find that we can stand by no longer as this demon, this Devil King, continues to advance his armies. We believe now that we face a man who will not be negotiated with, and merely wars for his own lust rather than conquest. Such a man cannot be allowed to rule this country. Though the hour is late, know that we already prepare our armies to marshal against this foe, and behind this messenger bird which carries our message, one of our Anbu commanders is already on his way to meet you, and shall be upon Mikoku Plateau, just east of your village upon October 28th. If you do not arrive by October the 31st to meet him, then we shall assume that you have no wish for our assistance, either because you are already planning surrender, or no longer have the will or resources to fight. In which case we are regretful in our late hour. At the bottom of the scroll was the seal of the daimyo of Snow Country, far in the north. A land, as of yet, untouched by this war, whose ninjas were few but whose resources and remarkable sources of iron may indeed be invaluable towards the war effort. This seems too convenient. Zhuge Liang spoke up from his place in the room, bringing Gaara's and Baki's attention towards him. With all due respect, Reikage-sama, Baki began. At this point we need all the help we can get. No, he's right, Gaara said as he straightened. Why offer an alliance now? When we're at our weakest, well, after Kumo has fallen. Even if they thought before Kumo that he could be reasoned with, it still makes no sense. We stand a much greater chance of losing this war than ever before. They're throwing in their lot with the losing side. No daimyo who actually cares about his nation, as his previous statements seem to imply, would do that. Liang nodded, taking a moment to clear his tea before he spoke. Exactly, not only that, but he is asking to meet you, in a location not an hour away from your village. Why not simply come here? Yuki ninja have always been known for their secrecy though. Tsunade spoke up for the first time. To this day no one but the daimyo is given the location of their village, it's how they hide considering their fewer numbers. Yes, that itself is something to take into consideration. Yuki ninja rely on ambushes, traps and speed, they cannot engage Konoha's forces in a straight battle, much less on foreign territory and hope to have a chance of victory. Everything about this proposal for an alliance screams falsehood. Liang said with a shake of his head. But the seal is real. Baki put in. We cannot dispute that. And even, if this is a trap, if it is some kind of falsehood, forgive me, Kazekage if I speak out of turn but, it is your duty to make sure that this is not genuine if it does prove to be so. Are you suggesting that your commander, regardless of the obvious evidence that points to the contrary, follow this lead as if it were genuine, arrive at the meeting spot as though there was no merit to suspicion of a trap? Tsunade spoke, rounding on Baki. No, of course not, Baki stated with an affronted air. All I am saying, is that this could be the difference between our winning and losing the war. We cannot ignore this just because it might be a trap. She seemed to move to speak once again before Gaara interrupted the medic. He's right. We cannot ignore this, the Kazekage stated. I will go. At the very least, you cannot go alone, an escort of your guards should accompany you. After a moment's hesitation, however brief, he added. I as well will go. If anyone noticed his pause, they did not comment. His deteriorating condition due to the chakra poisoning he had suffered at the hands of Naruto was still a matter well between himself and the medic that had attended him on that ship weeks ago. No one, not even his beloved Yue Ying, knew, and he intended to keep it that way for as long as possible. Gaara nodded. I never intended any different. I may not have your penchant for tactics and strategy, Zhuge Liang, but I assure you I'm no fool. The Raikage bowed his head. Of course, Kazekage Dono. Turning to Baki, Gaara spoke. Baki, make sure teams are kept on standby for quick deployment. If something does happen up there, I don't want to be caught without backup, understood? Baki nodded. Yes sir, I'll start making the necessary preparations, the Junin stated before turning and leaving. Turning to Tsunade, the Kazekage opened his mouth but soon closed it, not really certain how to address the woman at this point. Have medical teams on standby as well please, he finally said after a moment, watching as the blonde medic gave a simple, curt nod before following Baki out of the office. I'm uncomfortable with this, Liang stated after a moment or so in silence. So am I, Gaara stated. But we can't let this hope, even faint and dangerous as it is, go unchecked. We have 3 days to prepare ourselves for the possible fight, Master Liang. Let us use it wisely. Liang nodded, though his expression was still grim. 3 days, 3 days more for the pain to increase, for his vision to darken, his feeling of touch and hearing to dim. For his reflexes to dull, for his bones to further ache, and for his slow, arduous deterioration to continue. 3 days. The ship heaved to and fro beneath his feet, swaying steadily from side to side as he watched the lone Chunin tend to his fallen general. It was by far not what he wanted in a medic. The Chunin had only begun rudimentary training in the field. Not only had the medics already left when Jiraiya had gone on this expedition, but, by his own admittance, the Toad Sannin did not even believe that a medic was necessary for him, and so, even if they had still been in wave, he may not have even brought one. Naruto found himself in a damnable situation, once again loathing the circumstances that rendered him useless in these circumstances. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed over his red shroud once again firmly over his shoulders. Temari stood not far behind him, apparently worried over the Hyuga's condition, as though they didn't stand on opposite ends of the battlefield at the end of the day. Jiraiya stood at his other side, just as worried for Hinata as Temari, possibly more so. Though he'd never trained Hinata, he had known her for as long as he had known Naruto, and thus, being one of the few others which could relate to Konoha's alienated cage, she was one of the few he could ever express his concerns with. Her death would only further increase this long-held feelings of isolation among his peers due to his station, in both rank, and Naruto's personal opinions. Besides Hinata, and perhaps, though less so, Kakashi, there was no one he trusted more than him. It was not a role he relished. Being much more aware of than most of the various acts he had committed and Naruto had sanctioned in the name of peace. The three watched in silence as the would-be medic worked on her. Jiraiya allowed his eyes to trail curiously towards their hostage Tsunade Konoiki. He knew that sometimes, captured individuals developed bonds with their captors, so it was truly no surprise to note the, as far as he could tell, genuine concern for Hinata on her face. But what was surprising was Naruto's tolerance of her presence. She was still their enemy, and her concern for Hinata would barter no pity or quarter from him. Seeing Hinata in thus vulnerable state was not something he'd allow from an enemy normally, so what had changed? Naruto, apparently satisfied, or growing increasingly angry at the scene, turned away from it with a flare of his red robe, giving Jiraiya the silent order to follow. It surprised the Toad Sannin that it had taken this long actually. Usually Naruto was all business, and personal things came never. The fact that he'd been watching this Chunin dutifully run whatever few tests and medial remedies he knew for nearly an hour was equivalent to a world record for him. Temari watched them go, knowing that what they would discuss was not for her ears, and neither would it be if Naruto had anything to say about it. She sighed, allowing herself to slide down the wall and sit outside the door in the cramped hallway, continuing to watch as the Chunin tended to Hinata as best he could. The two made their way through the halls silently, with many of the crew hastily making scarce as they saw the towering figure make towards the captain's quarters, which Jiraiya, and most certainly Naruto, was more than willing to make theirs as they made use of the ship. The captain had been less than pleased. But, even though he wasn't Naruto, Jiraiya was more than enough to shut up a single untrained captain. And so they had the place all to themselves. Naruto opened the door, stepping through the portal and around the old, half-rotten desk the captain kept in his quarters for his own use, and took a seat, Jiraiya following his example a moment later, only he took a seat across from the blonde. Report. Oh sure, nice to see you too. The Toad Sannin began sarcastically. I know it's been nearly 2 months since we've seen each other, Naruto, but we really shouldn't waste time with the pleasantries, since our ship will somehow gain the speed of a rampaging leopard summon and be across the ocean in a matter of seconds. We have no time to waste with hellos, and how have things been, and are you Alri? Jiraiya. Naruto in quickly losing patience with the older man's tirade. The Toad Sannin for his part, rolled his eyes. And he'd been worried. Leaning back in his chair, he rubbed the bridge of his nose before speaking. Well, most of the ninjas you took with you on those ships are fine. The pirate and mercenary population isn't too happy with you, but it's to be expected. We only had 16 or so or MIA, including yourself. A few others sustained injuries, some serious, but most were minor. All in all, the elites you brought with you got out relatively okay. What happened to Kumo? The Cage questioned without pausing. Reports are just garbled rumors from the messengers and you common passerby. But we won apparently. Kumo is completely destroyed, from what I hear. Naruto nodded but did not comment, mind now no doubt taking in this event and plotting his next move. Jiraiya wondered if he even took a moment to find satisfaction in what he'd accomplished, what they stood upon the cusp of creating. Or if he simply moved on like clockwork. Eventually he stood from his chair, marching to look out of the stained glass window towards the rear of the ship, opening it in order to see the greenish sea's foamy surface left in the boat's wake. Once we make landfall, Jiraiya, you must send out messages to all of our armies, and all of our villages to amass their forces for a final campaign. Jiraiya stood, straightening almost subconsciously. So you really think this is it then? This is where it will all end? Yes, Naruto stated after a brief pause. And as such we must make a statement with this final conquest. We cannot suffer defeat, as we did in Sakai before I arrived, and this victory cannot be Pyrrhic, as was recently against Kumo. This must be absolute. They could surrender, the Toad Sannin said, hoping to keep Naruto from getting too far ahead of himself. They could, he admitted after a very long pause. But if they do not, I intend to destroy sooner. I intend to break sooner. Jiraiya didn't know what it was. But something in his voice then changed. He was always cold, always teetering on that edge of callous apathy and impatient aggression, but this was different. This was chillingly cold, dangerous. And it chilled even Jiraiya in a way he'd thought had long been past them. Sakura sighed as she followed Ino and Shikamaru into the dingy little bar at the edge of Suna's own red light district. A scene that had become more familiar as of late, much more so than what she appreciated. They entered to the smell of tobacco, alcohol, cheap perfume, and even cheaper The patrons were what she expected, middle-aged men, stumbling over each other in their own sweat and grime, loud and rambunctious. some with women draped over their laps like trophies or simple pieces of meat. For a Kanoiki who took pride in both herself and those of her s, it was an utterly disgusting sight. And of course, there he was, right in the middle of it, sitting at the bar, screaming profanities at the bartender, demanding another bottle of the rice wine. Only the stool and his hands on the countertop keeping him upright at this point. Damn it, Kiba! Ino roared in front of the other two, marching up to the shaggy-haired boy's back. A fury held her sympathy out of sight as she made her way closer. How many times are we gonna have to get your out of this s-hole? She grabbed his prosthetic arm. Surprised, the Inuzuka pulled away, losing his balance and falling flat on his back, bringing the cursing of several patrons he disturbed, but all was silenced quickly and effectively by a single glare from Shikamaru. Kiba blinked, dazed from his place on the ground as he blinked up to the ceiling. Finding Ino's platinum blonde hair and scowling visage in his peripheral vision before he smiled, wide and clearly drunk. No-chan, he slurred, beginning to stumble back up to his feet, nearly falling over again before said blonde helped him. Come on you oaf, the Kanoiki said with a grunt. Let's get you home again. She growled. No. Kiba stuttered drunk, pulling himself free and stumbling into several other of the patrons, ignoring their indignant shouts of anger. I don't wanna go home. I wanna stay here. Kiba, you're not staying here. Ino said, mounting frustration over his recent behavior as well as increasing impatience, giving her a very limited tolerance this night. Now let's just get you home already so that I can get home and get some damn sleep. She stepped forward again only for Kiba to suddenly draw one of his kunai, bringing Shikamaru to stand in front of his old teammate rather protectively. His eyes were wild, like a frenzied animal, cornered and looking to attack the predators that had cornered it. Kiba, the shadow wielder, began somewhat placatingly, watching as many of the other drunk patrons gave the Inuzuka a wide berth, while some outright left the establishment. Sakura took the opportunity to circle behind him, the previous lethargy she had come in with now free of her bones, eyes alert and waiting for the opportunity. He could stop this with his Kijimane, but let her get into position first. It looked like she wouldn't get the chance though. Tears glistened the taller male's eyes as he clenched the blade in his hand. His voice wavered, though it was now due more to its choked nature rather than his drunken state. You don't understand. Why you don't understand? He yelled, lunging towards Shikamaru, blade in hand. Drugged and unfocused as he was, it was a simple matter to disarm him, twisting his arm behind his back before the Inuzuka down to the ground, digging his elbow right below his ribs, his other hand holding tightly onto Kiba's apprehended wrist, thanking whatever God existed that he wasn't in the proper state of mind to focus that prosthetic puppet arm of his beyond simple motions. Calm down, damn it. Troublesome idiot. It's us, Kiba, we're your friends. Don't wanna go home. He sobbed, tears now trailing freely down the side of his face, down the cheek that was pressed against the floor. Don't wanna go home. He repeated. She's not there anymore. He finished, broken sobs shaking his entire body. Ino, Shikamaru and Sakura each shared a knowing look, unable to look upon their friend with anything but deep pity. Ino ran a hand through his brown mane of hair, swallowing down her own tears. It's all right. Kiba, it's all right. We know. Shikamaru quickly removed Kiba's weapons before lifting him off the ground, organic arm slung over his shoulder, wooden one hanging limply from his side, either not having the will, or the concentration to muster the chakra strings necessary to wield it properly. Ino wrapped an arm around his waist, helping to keep him upright before she looked back to Sakura. Hey, Sakura, she said solemnly. You go on home. Shika and I can handle things from here. The puppeteer out of part-time medic nodded, eyes never leaving Kiba's back as they dragged him out the front door, noticing only now that almost all the patrons had left. All but one, and that alone made her easy to spot, whereas before she had been nothing more than a face in the crowd. A face she now recognized. Tsunade-sama, the pink-haired Kanoiki questioned uncertainly, having only met the woman somewhat briefly during the naval battle where they had fought together. The platinum-haired legend sighed, her shoulders sagging. What is it? She questioned, her tone biting and impatient as she turned her chocolate-brown eyes unto Sakura. Sakura's mouth opened and closed, fishing for words that came with hesitation. What are you doing here? Drinking? What does it look like? She questioned bitterly, taking a rather long gulp of sake for emphasis. she began. Why here? Sakura was certainly no stranger to the bottle in her 2 decades of life, but there were certainly much nicer places when one wanted to get a drink. She didn't think someone of Tsunade status would be in a place like this. It's as good a place as any. Tsunade shrugged. You got something you wanna ask? Because I really would rather get back to my drinks. How long will you be here then? Is that any of your business? The medic asked. No Tsunade-sama, I'm sorry, she said quickly before bowing and leaving. Tsunade didn't even watch her go, uncaring as to her presence or absence. She came here for a simple reason. None recognized her. There were certainly ninja bars, all of which had sake that tasted 1,000 times better than this, but she didn't want to be pestered like this Kanoiki had clearly been doing. Just her luck that her friend had chosen to find her refuge from home to adopt as his own. Temari stood on the deck of the ship, back leaning heavily against the mast. Guards weren't needed. There was nowhere she could really go at this point, and so she was left mainly to her own devices, leaving her, once again, rather bored. The pirates were intimidated, the ninja didn't care, Hinata was unconscious, and Naruto certainly wouldn't care. So, here she stood, eyes fixed on the moon hanging high in the sky, reflecting off the sheen of the ocean's glassy, inky black surface. Enjoying the view, Temari spun around, finding Jiraiya standing on the deck, leaning heavily on his cane, a small, somewhat forced smirk on his features. She shrugged, attempting to act as nonchalant as possible while not seeming rude. It's better than most. Jiraiya walked up to her side, passing her, beckoning her to follow onto the front of the ship. She did so, if only because she had nothing better to do. And pissing off the second in command was highly inadvisable. When he reached the front, Jiraiya lifted himself to sit on the railing, positioning himself rather comfortably before he began speaking. So tell me, what happened while you guys were on the island then? She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? And what makes you think anything happened in the first place? I wasn't exactly with the most sociable of people. Jiraiya nodded in acceptance, lips pursing before he spoke. Well, for one, you didn't immediately leave their side when you arrived. Something many of his own friends would want to do after only a few hours. We saw you both talking on the beach as we made our approach, something that hardly ever happens unless it's business related. And, he shrugged. Don't know. Just a feeling really. Temari's eyebrow raised in open skepticism. Sure, and I'm supposed to believe this, carefree, unpressurized attitude of yours? Think that's gonna endear me to you or something? Jiraiya in response offered a look before pointing with his cane. We can't all be as serious as your previous 2 roommates. Some of us do want a social life outside of the job, he said. And it was true too. At least in Naruto's case. Though Hinata wasn't a bucket of laughs, giggles and smiles, she did attend to parties Kakashi, Anko or some of the other ninja elite held. Even cracking a smile or two while she'd been there. Naruto, however, you'd be lucky if you even caught him at a meeting beyond his home, the training grounds or the cage tower. Temari shrugged in something akin to acceptance before walking over to the other side of the railing and planting her rump over it, legs dangling. Nothing happened. Just a lot of sleepless nights, cold showers, cleaning Hinata, and birds. Then, what were you talking about while on the beach? He questioned, fishing. Something had to have happened. Temari smirked in remembrance, though the smile was somewhat bitter. Me and my overactive imagination. At that, Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, clearly stating, do you honestly expect me to believe that, with merely his expression alone? You talked about your imagination. Temari rolled her eyes, chuckling. Of course not. Just the things it made me think up. She laughed, though in truth, it sounded more like a disdainful snort. Though, at the time of their conversation, she had believed that he merely denied her assumptions out of habit, or simply because he felt insecure with her knowing. Over the course of the last day or so, as she ran the memory over and over in her head once again, she couldn't help but second-guess herself and how true she felt her assumptions towards his emotions were. I thought he'd actually loved a woman once. Lady called Yoshino. She laughed, but the sounds in her tea at Jiraiya's back going ramrod straight, muscles tensing, and the cane faltering from his grip, almost falling to the floor before he caught it. How do you know that name? And with that statement, all her suspicions, imaginings, wonders and general thoughts over this woman returned in a blinding and dizzying speed, one after another going through her head before she responded to his question, stuttering her response. He said her name once. In his sleep. Jiraiya swallowed thickly, knitting his hands together as he stared straight at her. And you confronted him with this. She nodded. Do you know who she is? Jiraiya sighed, running a hand through his white mane of hair, a shuddering breath escaping him before he spread his senses outward, making absolutely certain that Naruto was nowhere near earshot. Yay. I do. I think I may be the only one other than him who does. Now Temari's curiosity was eating her up. Leaning heavily forward, she gulped, swallowing to moisten her suddenly dry tea before she spoke. Who was she? Jiraiya looked at her then, debating in his own mind if he should tell her anything about Yoshino. It was one of those few things Naruto kept close, that Naruto kept closer than anything else, even some of the village's greatest secrets. The only reason he even knew was because he'd investigated old records and files which spoke of Naruto's psychological debriefing after the mission he undertook, aiding the Amantaki ninja, saying he may have gained some attachment towards the two allied generals Kenpachi and Yoshino, and because he had noticed some changes in the young man when he returned, after them. He wished sorely that he had been present at that battle, instead of having mere second-hand accounts. I can't tell you much, he admitted after a long tense moment. Only that she had once been his ally, then, years ago, his enemy. So she betrayed him. Jiraiya shrugged. I can't say what happened, I'm not clear on all the accounts. Naruto had many of those records sealed or destroyed. He doesn't speak of it. It's more of an unspoken rule than anything. Temari paused, remembering the question that had plagued her since learning of Yoshino's name. Did he love her? The Toad-san shook his head. I'm not sure. Temari sighed, shoulders sagging slightly in disappointment. Jiraiya continued, though bringing her attention back towards him. I think that if he could have loved anyone in his life, it would have been her though. Temari averted her eyes, memory returning to those last few words exchanged before the ship arrived. You really did love her, didn't you? Once again, you associate useless emotions to me, Sabaku. She is S now, regardless. And it occurred to her. He didn't deny her statement. Yugito marched through the city's streets, making her way towards the western gate where she found the two individuals ready to depart, along with their escort. What the hell? She roared, marching up towards them, fists clenched at her side, body coiled with restrained anger. Kazekage, Sensei Yugito. Liang began calmly, interrupting her, already knowing the source of her anger. You are needed more here than with us. The village cannot be left unprotected. The Nibi Jinchuriki growled in displeasure. Despite the fact that, as of late, she had begun to distrust her master more and more, he was still one of the few people she really had left. Shizune was S, Tsunade was a wreck, and Akina was missing, possibly S as well. Many of her other friends had S when the village was attacked. Liang and Yueying were all she had left, and not going on a mission that was jeopardizing his safety was disconcerting. She knew he was still stronger than her in many respects, and could probably beat her, but she still wanted to be there just in case. She was better than the Anbu he was taking with him at any rate. But Sensei, she began only for him to, once again, see her off. Yugito, he said, turning to look at her with those coal black eyes, a blank gaze firmly in place. Even if I could take you, your personal attachment to me alone is something that would put you in more danger than necessary and thus non-viable for this mission. She finished with a displeased sigh. Fine. Just be careful, she said before turning on her heel and marching down the street once again. She should have known better. He always had his mind made up. Gaara watched her go, some strange mix of apathy and amusement over his features before Liang turned to face him once again. Let us go, the Raikage stated towards his red-haired counterpart, watching as Gaara and the Anbu escort nodded before the eight of them vanished in plumes of smoke. The ship rocked softly to and fro as it approached the mainland, creaking and rocking beneath them as it came closer and closer. Naruto stood on deck, the sea breeze once again flaring out his robe behind him. Jiraiya wondered if he did that on purpose somehow. The clouds hung heavy in the sky, darkening the midday sun with a hue of grey shadows as though it were dusk rather than noon. As they approached, the city of Wave was silent, lights, all off, nothing moved, no people traversed the docks, ghosts did not even dwell in these streets. There was nothing. This isn't right, Temari stated beside him, eyes traveling from left to right. Naruto eyed her over his shoulder, nodding once before looking to Jiraiya and the other Chunins on the ship. You men, guard Hinata, Jiraiya, remain close to Temari. They all nodded, with the Chunin quickly scrambling down the deck stairwell to reach their charge. As they made their way to port, the deathly stillness and silence seemed to blanket the area, the graying shadows of the clouds only accentuating the foul feeling emanating from the previously bustling city of Wave. The docks creaked as the men tied the ship to the beams, even the sounds of the sloshing waters seemed inadvertently hushed here. A thick mist seemed to creep up their legs and into the air, creating a veil of gray all around them. The hidden mist technique. Jiraiya pushed Temari further behind him, strategies running through his mind as to what he could do to keep her safe, while also defending himself. A chakra pulse to their right dispelled the mist around the ship, rendering its protective veil of stealth unavailable to their would-be assailants. Wait here, the blonde stated calmly, making his way towards the side of the ship where they were connected to the dock. He stepped over the railing, several of the crew scrambling to get out of his way. Be careful. He paused, craning his end to look back towards Temari, whom had uttered the plea, blue gaze searching for something. Who knew what? Falseness, greed, sarcasm. The list ranged from person to person. He leapt down to the docks without a word, marching across its wooden planks with easy strides. Though he did not have his blades, his kunai would be more than enough for whatever rabble had gathered here. The Mikoku Plateau was a flat expanse of land atop a sandstone hill, 50 yards in length, give or take, 30 across. Gaara, Zhuge and the Anbu that accompanied them, now found themselves at this location, all in various states of anxiousness, wondering if the messenger would even show at all. Though the Anbu had quickly established a perimeter, and line of sight given their high ground advantage was good, they still had yet to see hide nor hair of the supposed individual. Gaara in particular was anxious. Though passive and patient by nature, he was still young, and so sitting here, when he could be doing productive work in the tower, was obviously not something that sat well with him. Unlike Liang, whom could seemingly remain content to stand on the arid desert plateau all day. Which is essentially what they had been doing. Kazekage-sama, one of the Anbu stated, turning to face his commander. Perhaps it would be best for a henge. One of us to take both your and Raikage-sama's place, while you pretend to be one of us. Zhuge nodded, though Gaara seemed displeased by the notion. Badger, I don't believe. The sky suddenly rumbled above them, a deep, resonating growl which vibrated through their sea, and down their legs, as if seeking to shake the earth itself. The skies, clear and blue overhead, darkened, becoming dark and black at an astonishing speed. In mere minutes a heavy downpour began, drenching the men and women standing on the plateau, soaking their clothing straight through. I've never seen a storm gather this fast, one of the Anbu said over the roaring rain. Zhuge closed his eyes, senses gathering around him before his eyes opened, zipping left and right in search of someone. This is no storm. How right you are, Raikage Dono. The voice brought everyone's attention towards the end of the plateau. Wind chimes jungled in the sea breeze, the harsh beating of wave upon rock creating a desolate melody that trailed over the empty streets, its only traveler. The mist was thick, heavy, and even with his advanced vision he could not see beyond his own hand. But he sensed them. Shadows and shapes, the rustling of dirt, the shifts in the mist, the vibrations underfoot, their brief silhouettes. He knew they were there, and he knew they merely followed him, they did not trail back for the boat. The people here were gone, most likely yes. But there was no smell, no trace, no obvious signs of violence. This was all done in silence, in moments, a city wiped clean with a mere whimper scarcely escaping it. They were good, but they would not defeat him. His hand lashed out, a silvery gray chain and sickle attachment wrapping around his gauntlet before he yanked. It gave resistance for a moment before giving completely, the counterweight thudding to a stop near his feet. He tossed the weapon aside, its thud compounded by 3 others, which were the kunai thrown into the general vicinity of where the sound had emerged. He could not see them, but just the same they could not see him. He clicked his gauntlets rather loudly, the screech alerting the marksman to his presence where he threw the weapons. Naruto watched their trajectory, dodging the 3 before rushing through the mist, vanishing into its gray depths. For a moment, there was nothing but silence before the clashing of blade upon blade, the ringing, high-pitched echoes and screeches distorted amongst the wooden houses and the density of the mist before a crash ended the skirmish. Now, they had no choice. They could not identify by sound which one he was and which was their comrade. They needed to dispel the mist, and thus, reveal themselves. Naruto watched, standing on the lip of an opening, where the mist began to dissolve, finding the silhouette of an individual, becoming clearer and clearer in the dim view. The individual stood, arms hidden beneath a cloak, face hidden behind a spiral mask. The mask was obscure, a spiral, unfamiliar. But the cloak he recognized. The voice was hollow, a clicking of wood upon wood, strained as though the individual was whispering. And at once Gaara's and the others' eyes watched as a man, seemingly short due to his hunched posture, face obscured by a simple cloth and a wooden scorpion-like tail, emerged from the sands like some demonic desert scarab. Sasori of the Red Sand. Zhu Liang said, eyes narrowing in recognition, lips thinning in unease at the sight of the cloak with the red cloud design. You are not completely ignorant. The Sunan Yup Nin said with a smirk as he finished shaking off the sand from his shoulders. You're the only ignorant here. One of the Anbu stated, drawing his blade. Revealing your position before you attacked. Revealed. Or merely distracted. The ninja shot back with clear amusement dancing in his eyes before 5 others exploded from the ground behind them, each having the same red-rimmed eyes that fixed themselves upon a singular target. And as the mist cleared around him, the shadowed, veiled forms of others came into view, the one with the mask he'd knocked down. One of short stature and long hair, the blue-skinned, monster of the mist, Hoshikage Kisame, and lastly, he was met with the bee-red eyes of the Mangekyo Sharingan. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.